Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all. This is the Business Day Spotlight, your destination for African business made simple. My name is Mudiwa Gavaza, and for today, we're getting into a conversation that is very important. It's something that we've touched on in many different guises. We often talk about financial planning from many different aspects out there, whether we're talking about investing, some of the basics such as budgeting, the great wealth transfer that a lot of people are talking about right now, to say that you have a generation that, for the next, let's call it 2 decades, will be handing over their wealth to the next generation. But at the same time, for today, we're having a discussion about that younger generation, what my guest calls the sandwich generation, to say, how are they coping, with what's going on in the market right now. Back in the day, when I was younger, I would have referred to the generation that's being spoken about as the adults, in the room. Young as I am, I kind of count myself as being part of this generation that is there. We are building families, we are professionals. As parents are getting older, you're now thinking about how do you take care of them in retirement. You're also thinking about how do you take care of the younger generation. We have aspirations, we have goals, that we're trying to plan for, and my guest is an ardent supporter, to say we must be amenable, or looking to have conversations with professionals around those finances, and making sure that we plan appropriately. So to make sense of what's happening around this sandwich generation, and some of the big items that are topical right now, we are joined by Jodi Suchard, who is an advisory partner over at Citadel. Jodi, greetings to you today.
Morning, evening, afternoon. Thank you for having me. I
All right.
appreciate it.
So, good place for us to start. We look at the economy all the time on this platform. And for years, we've been talking about sluggish economic growth at, roughly 1%, if not lower in certain cases. We've been talking about a post-COVID recovery. We've been talking about right now a global recession. We've been talking about a joblessness crisis, amongst segments of the broader economy, and then the youth. We've been talking about consumer pressure. We've been talking about a country that is indebted, people that are living paycheck to paycheck, people that are undersaved when it comes to planning for retirement. But these are the messages that we hear from the outside. You're a professional. What is the financial reality right now for this generation, roughly people in the 30s up to their 50s right now? What's going on? What does the picture look like?
So, my first point is block out all the noise, because that is the biggest challenge we face. Even in this year, markets were very volatile, and they were volatile. We understand they were volatile because of the tariffs, and from a US perspective, even in South Africa, markets have been volatile. But I always say, let's look at it based on your current situation. It's not all doom and gloom out there. So I'm one of those individuals that say, yes, markets have had a pullback, for example, and there is a recovery, but I always say, when do you need the money? Timing is important. If you needed the money tomorrow, would you be in developed market equities? Is my first question. If you needed the money tomorrow, you would be in a safe investment that is more catering for your cash flow requirements. When you go into developed market equities, that's all about longer term money, planning. You can weather volatility on that side. I also say to my clients, it's never too late to start saving. That's important to point out because it's not about the number, it's about consistent good behavior. So you could be saving 100 Rand a month, but it's about that consistent saving mechanism because that's all about how we consistently build up our wealth. I always talk about a story, and I'm just going to, you can stop me you if you need to interrupt, but I talk about this story quite often on a lot of my discussions with clients. There was two individuals that I always refer to. The one is a Grace Groner, and you can Google Grace Groner, and the other one is Richard Fuskin. Now, these two individuals, why I say they are so different is Grace Groner grew up with no family. She had hardly any education. She was a secretary. She didn't marry, she lived a very modest life. Whereas Richard Fuskin was a banker. He retired at a very young age and he started investing in alternative investments and thought he had enough money for the remainder of his life. What happened, which is very interesting, at the same point, Grace Groner lived till over 100. She passed away. In that week, Richard Fuskin was declared bankrupt. How is that possible? Now, two people. Richard was beyond educated and worked at a bank. He thought he had saved, but with poor planning and actually borrowing mechanisms, resulted in Richard Fuskin's downfall. Whereas with Grace Groner, it was all about consistent good planning and investments. Wasn't about the quantum, it was about the consistent behavior she adopted and the power of money. So that's important. I'm just saying it does not make a difference from an educational perspective. It all makes a difference about emotional, how we save and how we see things going forward.
Jody, as you were talking about, that discipline that a person's needed, I'm reflecting on a book by, it's an oldish book by now, by a guy called Thomas J. Stanley, called The Millionaire Next Door. And he talks about, it was, I believe, a decades long study of millionaires in the United States. And one of the things that they consistently found is that a lot of millionaires were not people that were, at least in the entrepreneurial space, they were not people that had invented anything, but rather they were people that had gone into a simple business that had a tried and tested, simple business method, and it was actually dry cleaning. That was one of the biggest sources of millionaires. And then second to that was actually I believe it was blue collar work. And to your point, it was blue collar work where people don't really expect much in terms of lifestyle, but they just simply implemented a simple method of saving and investing, and over 30, 40 years compounded, and suddenly,
Warren
yeah,
Buffett said compounding, the power of compounding, it
yeah,
grew. Yes, sorry, go for it. Yes.
compounding. And yeah, there you see a teacher or a fireman, having millionaire status later on in life, and you're like, but they had such a modest career path, but it was simply because they just did all of these seemingly boring things, and that led them to where they are. Why are we so adverse to do the simple boring things? uh
It's not exciting. Why would you do it? You in your early, late 20s. It's also, you want more. You feel that it's lazy money in a way, like saving, and you're doing it very consistently, but conservative saving could be boring. And why I say conservative saving, in my mind, it depends on when you need the money. So you invest based on, if I needed the money in the longer term, go into a more aggressive portfolio. So that gives you an opportunity to see the money work for itself, grow. And one aspect I always tell people, never manage your own money. Why? We're emotional. We always governed by greed, sentiment, fear. So when we see our money basically having a drawdown, we say we can't watch this during COVID. If you withdrew your money just at the start of COVID, you would have lost a significant amount of your wealth. If you actually allowed the money to recover back to the point of where you started, it would have grown even further. So sometimes it's very important to have a trusted person. And I'm not selling myself, but somebody who's clinical, independent, and can give you proper advice on how the money should be invested and educated. And I always say it's simple. It shouldn't be difficult. Why reinvent, like you've said, reinvent the wheel? Continue with the same process that has happened for years, for generations.
When it comes to this type of discussion, and we've actually spoken to a couple of money managers on this platform, and they've said the same thing, that the data shows that even some of the best money managers, the moment that they go out and try to manage their own money, they tend to lose it because you suddenly become emotional as opposed to being detached when you're managing other people's money, which is fascinating, to say the least. My question is just around it's around a couple of things, but where I'll start is a lot of evidence suggests that wealth and earning power has actually increased over time. But a lot of the narratives out there paint a picture where these generations, what we're talking about, the 30 to 50, are actually in a worse off financial position but earning more. What's happening? Make it make sense there.
As we know, we live in an environment where inflation is a big problem. So we know that. So the cost of living has increased dramatically. Yes, we're earning a lot more than our parents earned or our grandparents earned, but the living standards have increased dramatically from that side. So that's what's happened because our income is not actually supporting the lifestyle that we feel we're accustomed to. When I say we feel, it's how our parents brought us up, which is problematic because some of our parents bring us up to say we must have these lavish holidays, we must drive these fancy cars, we must live in a huge house, own our ponies, own horses, and the like. However, when we become independent, it is very hard to sustain that lifestyle that you were brought up and used to your let's call it while you were living at home. So it becomes actually keeping up with the Joneses, which is a problem. You're trying to make sure that you live the standard that you were always living, but you actually don't even have the income to support that. And the expenses are more expensive. So in my plan and always what I talk to my clients about is never overindulge your kids. Never give them live they must live a modest life. You must live a modest life. Yes, you can enjoy your life with the beauty that's out there, but if your kids are expecting to have the standard when they are educated, they will be very disappointed. Because after you've studied at university, you go find a job. Yes, it might be a brilliant job. However, that job will not pay the standard you used to in the past. Inflation has started to creep up. You want a beautiful home. You don't want a small little apartment. You also feel, why must I save? Because I'm not earning enough. So when you educated and you finish varsity and finish your degree, the biggest letdown or drawdown in somebody of that age is that you can't keep up with the standard you were accustomed to. So that's important just to point out because it's quite sad when you get to that level. Also, between the 30 to 50-year age group, costs have become very expensive. We're also trying to ensure that we're saving at the same time. That should be part of the plan ultimately, as well as ensuring that we do proper budgeting. But between the age and 30 to 50, we're not doing any of that or not doing as much as we should be. The reason being is we're living from, like you've said, salary to and paying our expenses. So every month we are actually just coming out. So it's important to just have a look and say, what is my budget? Let me be realistic with my plan. Why am I just coming out or not covering my expenses? And actually have a hard conversation with somebody who will listen and help you to cut your costs slightly and to ensure that your salary actually can also be utilized for future savings.
Jody, one of the things that you mentioned just now is the fact that it would be good and great if people were to engage professional, either wealth advisors, money managers, financial planners, people within that realm, to help them to plan and invest, budget, think about their financial lives, with a little bit more reality, that type of thing. But if I take a step back, right, I'm keen to get your sense on something that I feel very passionate about, which is that I think as a society, we are just not having good quality conversations about money. We've made money a taboo,
Mm, correct.
type of subject. On a social level, people don't, find it, hard to talk about finances. It's seen as tacky in some circles. In others, it's looked at as being inappropriate. In many people's formal employment contracts, it's even mandated that people that work in the same office cannot talk about what they're earning with each other. And
Mm.
those types of attitudes seem to filter to the household level where parents don't really discuss finances with their kids, and it's only at a certain point when something happens, and then suddenly the kids are made aware of the financial realities. A lot of people felt that during COVID, where suddenly hard conversations were thrust on a lot of families. So I wanted to get your sense on what impact our attitudes towards even just having simple, friendly and household conversations about money factor into people even bothering to engage with professionals such as yourselves around their financial planning.
So it's a very interesting it's a very interesting topic, this, and it all stems from how we were brought up. And I know you say, but is that possible? So I always like to bring up to my kids, yes, I invested X amount of money. However, the markets had a pullback, and I don't speak at high levels. I speak to them that they understand and try and educate them that money is not a taboo subject. Also, I understand in places of employment, the biggest risk you face is saying, I get a certain amount. What does my colleague get? If your colleague gets more, you will be seen to be as are you valued as somebody within the organization. So I understand within corporates that money should not be spoken about from a salary perspective, but from an investment perspective, it's a whole different conversation because you don't need to have an actual amount of money that a quantum to talk about. You just need to educate everyone. And that's very key to how it will become an easier conversation going forward. So, in my mind, I believe that yes, we were brought up with certain beliefs, and our parents believed that maybe talking about money wasn't a conversation point for the kids. I do believe things have changed. I do believe that we need to educate everyone about money. And it might not be about per se money, it might be about just buying groceries, relating it to an everyday event, but talking about it that you're not scared to have that conversation with another person. Also, find a trusted person that you can talk about your own personal affairs and say, this is where I am at this particular point. How can I save or reduce my budget? Are there any ways that you can teach me regarding my future planning and my cash flow requirements. Because remember, what's important is about you don't know everything. You want somebody else who is not selling anything to give you advice. The minute you enter into a relationship of sales, you enter into a wrong relationship because they're pushing product and pushing other investments and don't have your best interest at heart. When we look at giving advice, we look at the full holistic picture and we say, how can we optimize your current situation? How can you become financially independent eventually over time and only work because you have to, only work because you want to, not because you have to. So we develop a roadmap with our clients, and every year we relook at that roadmap and say, how is that? We look at the past and say, how has that worked? And going forward, what's the goals for the next year? And that's key to ensuring that you're educating everyone with regard to money, budgeting, planning, and also enjoying your money. Because I think we also lose sight of the fact that we want to save, save, save. But at some point, you also want to save enough and also go on those experiences with your family. Because money is not going to make you happy, but the experiences you do with the money you've created potentially will give you that happiness that you're looking for.
Yeah, most certainly. I do agree with you on that front. Money is a tool, and it can swing either, positively or negatively. I actually don't think money on in of itself is inherently good or bad. It's what we do with it. Uh, I do agree with you there, Jody, to say that money is a tool at the end of the day. And it doesn't really have any leaning, to the good or bad. It's what we do with the money that determines whether it was positive or negative. And the way that people go about, putting their lifestyles together it's an interesting one, so to say, and the types of things that are informing those lifestyle decisions and how much of that is shaped by um, I guess the households that we were coming from, the money beliefs that we carried, through childhood, and then how that gets affected by the workplace, and then what we are then passing on to what you call this to the next generation. But the other curiosity that I then had is right now, as far as you can see, as someone who is, in the world of, wealth management, and just talking to people in this, 30 to 50 age range that we have focused on today's conversation about, for the people that are engaging with professionals such as yourselves, what is the discussion? What are people actually concerned about? Are they worried about, saving? Are they worried about, I want to grow my money? Are they talking the financial independence that you were alluding to just now? What are the pressing needs that people have right now?
So it's a very good question. Thank you. So when you enter into the 30 to 50 space, you have to look to buy a house. How do you buy a house? What is the plan to buy that house? There will be debt involved in purchasing a lifestyle asset. So that's a conversation we do talk about, and how much debt should be paid down and how quickly should you be paying that debt down. So we do talk about what we call lifestyle assets, meaning your home, your cars, and that in the beginning phases, you have to use debt to purchase that asset class. As you build up your wealth in your personal, from your employment or whatever from entrepreneurial activities, you have to service that debt as quickly as possible. In our mind, the debt needs to be paid off. So we use a similar concept of like an 80-20-20 principle. 80% of the money you saving, 80% must go to lifestyle and 20% must go to wealth preservation, because you need to still save money, and still become financially independent at a particular age. If you are employed by a corporation, retirement age, which is still today, unfortunately, saying that 65 is when you must retire, which means you need to have ensured you've accumulated enough wealth to pay your bills from 65 till 95 potentially. So we talk about people living too long. We talk about also the sandwich generation where your parents are living or your parents are dependent on you to support their standard. Your kids are also dependent on you. So you become basically the person that actually finances your whole family. And how do we balance that with your potential retirement plan? So we work through a strategy that is bespoke for every family. I always, in my first meeting with any person and family, I always say, what is your plan? What is your strategy? I need to design a solution that works around your plan. Because until I understand what your future or potential future looks like, I have no idea how to invest your funds, how to help you pay off your debt as quickly as possible, how to help you budget and plan for future expenses and for your kids. So we always unpack their current situation, and I work with them to design a roadmap that hopefully will give them guidance of what the future could look like, how much we need to save in order to become financially independent, and what are their alternative goals? Are they going to be living in South Africa? Are they going to be immigrating? Are their kids going to be moving abroad? Are their kids going to have weddings? So all of this conversation needs to be not, is has to be a conversation that is fluid and happens on a regular basis. And we try and design the plan to ensure they can meet those requirements. But when you're 30 and you've bought your first home, all you can focus on is the debt that has come with this first home, or your car, that debt that has come with the car. So if we've got a plan for to pay that debt off, it actually alleviates a lot of stress and emotional stress that we carry with us. Our parents always taught us never have debt. So it's all embedded in us how we were brought up. We need to change that whole discipline and the whole way in which we were brought up to ensure that it's appropriate for us and our family.
Jody, maybe we can just drill down into that last comment that you just made around a general aversion to debt.
Mm.
That it's quite pervasive on society. I guess the irony in a country like South Africa is the fact that so many people are, so indebted. But there tends to be that attitude that that debt is bad. But when you look at a lot of high net worth individuals as well as people in business, they're actually fans of of debt. They call it other people's money and that
Yes,
type of thing.
yes. I'll tell you, I like OPM, other people's money. Exactly that. Yes.
So how should we be thinking about debt?
Debt is it depends on the type of debt. Debt in your personal name, for example, I look to buy a primary home or I'm looking to buy a car, you do need, if you don't have enough liquidity, you do need to have debt to purchase that. You do need to have a bit of a credit record to get that debt. So, debt in your personal name, it is good to get started, but not too much debt that you can't service it. Debt in a company, for example, you talk about OPM, other people's money. Maybe that person has bought a property for their kids later on, but they need to rent it out. So what happens in that situation, the debt is very good. Why? Because if you don't have the debt, you will be liable for tax on the income earned from the rental income. So we ensure from a corporate perspective or from what you're taking out the debt for. Is it for just lifestyle to support my current standard, or is it to grow and build on what I want, being a property for each kid, rental income, or corporate debt? So there's different types of debt. So, debt in a corporate or rental income perspective is good because we also look to reduce your taxable obligation by structuring it in a manner that you won't be paying too much tax on the income earned. So it all depends, but I was in a meeting last week where a family was against it. And I said, but why are you against it? And they said to me, because their parents told them, if you don't have the money to physically buy it, you can't buy it. In today's environment, that's impossible. So let's be honest, when you're in your 30s or just gotten married and got kids, you haven't saved enough unless you receiving money from your parents, which is very slim in today's environment. So, debt is good for certain situations, and you need debt to support your lifestyle. But I'm saying too much debt is also too bad. You need to ensure the debt you take out can be serviced with the income you're going to be earning. But mindset and shift in our behavior is key around money. We always talk money. Yes, money is all about the IQ, but it's also about the EQ, the emotional intelligence around it. So, yes, smart people can manage your money, but if your foundation's completely broken, it's irrelevant how the smart people manage your money. So I always talk about both emotions around money and how to unpack it from the parents' perspective, from the kids' perspective, and how you're going to communicate this with your family. And that's key.
I want to spend the last part of today's discussion, Jody, talking about, another attitude towards money, that we've noted, because one of the things that keeps coming up in this discussion, to your point just now about the family that you spoke to, is what's told to us about certain aspects of money. But the other thing that tends to shape our attitudes towards money is how certain things are structured, right? So for example, if you are in what's the word I'm looking for, once upon a time everything was just about ownership, right? And that was the goal. I believe in our parents' generation, especially around property, the whole discussion was around ownership, ownership, ownership. But I've seen that there's been a little bit of a shift in our generation where there's almost that attitude that, well, the prices are so high that ownership is becoming out of reach. So, the game is we're here to rent for the rest of our lives. And you see some of that, coming up with the way that things are being structured nowadays, where it almost feels as if there's a subscription, right? The subscription for your house is rent, and the ownership discussions feel like they're becoming reduced. People are now questioning whether or not to even own a car. And you now have people that are coming up with subscription models around your car. People will even come up with models where the electronics in your house, your TV, fridge, etc. You don't really have to own it. You kind of lease it slash subscribe every couple of
Yeah.
months. Someone will come and
Yeah, I
upgrade
like
your
that.
stuff for you. So it almost feels as if everything is becoming a subscription, and discussions around money and ownership are changing. Are you encountering any of that? That's just something that I've noticed, but I wanted to check is, are you encountering any of that, and what do you think it does around how people then plan for the future if they feel like you can't even save enough to end up owning something? Let me just rather blow my money if I'm just gonna
Correct.
have to
That's
rent and subscribe for everything, so to say.
so I think what's important, it is coming up. So the car concept, people are using other mechanisms. They found that to own your own car, it's a depreciating asset class. It's cheaper to go in Uber and be transported in that manner. So I think cars are a very different, let's call it conversation point. And people have worked out, I've seen a lot of people have worked out that it's better to actually Uber around than own your own car. But I don't like that mentality. And the reason I don't like it is you're not hungry enough to pay for something. So you get your salary, like you said, and the people blow everything they've got because at the end of the day, they've got to pay somebody else's rent. They'll never own this property. Got to pay somebody else to come in and sort out my TV, my fridge, my car. I'll never own that. So in my thinking, everyone has to unfortunately or fortunately lower their standards and say this is what I can afford. What can I see within that price range, and what can I do? Maybe I need to save a bit to put a deposit down on a house, or maybe the bank will give me a bond. Unfortunately, now bond with the interest rates are very expensive, but you need to get your foot into that door to experience what it's like to own something. I don't believe leasing is um, a very good model to utilize because of the fact that in today's times we want to have some skin in the game. And I use that as a term, same as investments. We want skin in the game. We want to own some equity in something. And I think if you are hungry enough to do it and see that it's working, that this is your own house, you will start to become more hungry to make more income and more hungry to build your wealth quicker, pay off the debt, and start saving even more. So it's all about those consistent good decisions. So I am seeing the fact that it's easier. It's an easy way out. I don't have to own my property. I can have the landlord come and fix the house or sort out the garden. But that's a cop out. You need to have skin in the game and to see what it's like to own a property. But it might not be the property size that you're accustomed to. So that's where you have to just understand that what you were brought up, how you were brought up living, may be different to what you're going to get in the other side. And also, I'm going to just add one thing. You have to, if you are married, you have to, each spouse needs to contribute. I think that's where we at. Sorry. I know this is a very interesting conversation because it's not about, I remember my parents saying, the breadwinner in the family. You've both got to bring money to the table. You've both got to contribute. Also, your kids will see that as they grow up, that both parents are adding value to the home and bringing money in so we can go on a holiday, we can buy a car at our 18th birthday, and that's important. So, to be reliant on one income in today's environment is very difficult, and to not have any debt. The cost of living is very expensive if you want to educate your kids and you want to ensure that you've invested money in your kids. You cannot just be reliant on one income. And also, the other person, as we all part of a universe where there's resentment, where somebody's constantly bringing in the money, and you, as the other person that is maybe not bringing in any or small amounts, you have to ask for money. Why should that happen? You should also be independent. So both of you should be independent in your own right and contributing collectively to the house or to your family life. But it is a very it's a very sensitive topic, being having two spouses bringing in income and supporting the family.
No, to say that, it's an interesting one is an
I
understatement.
didn't. I
Uh,
might never be asked to come back after bringing that up. I might be told it's time to actually never have Jodi Suchard on your podcast again.
You've probably rattled a lot of cages right now.
Correct. Sorry.
There are probably members of the community listening to this, nodding their heads, saying, "Yes, Jodi understands. This is what needs to happen." Whereas on the other side, others will be shaking their heads like, "No, Jodi, this is not
You've
it. This is not it." But if we're going to be progressive, maybe this is where we can end off today's discussion, Jodi, to say, at least as much as we're talking about, the 30 to 50, generation, maybe where we end off is talking to the lower end of that scale, those in their 30s, because, for the younger part of that generation, that's, the ages at which a lot of people, seem to be getting married. Our generation, has found itself getting married in early 30s as opposed to late 20s, as we saw before. So from that point of view, what type of discussions do you think young couples entering into the world of marriage rather, should be having, about money, just to ensure that there's longevity on a relationship level, and that, all of these points that we've been talking about today end up being fruitful down the line, because it's about the household at the end of the day.
So it's a very interesting, as I said, topic. But what's important is be open and transparent. I think what's the key to any relationship is conversations. Having conversations about what is happening and being transparent and open. When you get married, the first thing as a family unit, you should look at your budget, your planning. How are you going to potentially buy that home if you want to? What is your salary bringing in, and how much can you contribute to the household? Because that's key. And also, how much maybe you can't find work. So, what alternative mechanisms can you bring to the household that might not be monetary? Maybe there's an alternative way in which you can support the family. So, I always say you need to be open and honest with the partner in which you are the partner which you potentially spending the rest of your life with, also your kids. We do shelter them from any aspect. We want to shield them from any negative aspects in life or failures. Unfortunately, when they go out into the big wide world, you cannot shield them from anything that happens out there. Failure or any, let's say, anything that impacts them, it builds resilience with children. They learn to cope with it and deal with it. So I think from my perspective and my maybe words of, let's say, wisdom is communication and education. So we want to ensure that we have those two lines in our family, and not everything is perfect. You can have kids that are brought up from the same family unit but have different emotional behaviors towards different aspects of money. It's just having those conversations and being honest with your partner, and ensuring that you consistently building also your wealth because at the end of the day, everyone wants to retire and know that they've got enough money to pay their bills. But it is a difficult conversation to have, very difficult, um, but it's an important one.
An important one indeed, and a good place for us to land today's conversation, just talking about, some of the financial realities for the 30 to 50 generation there. Jody just giving us some insight into what's happening, in that particular space, that's sitting there. Calling it the sandwich generation, because you have an older generation that's become dependent, on this generation. At the same time, that generation having, young children, families that are dependent on them. So sort of caught in between, that younger generation and that older generation. Hence, the sandwiching metaphor that is being used there, talking quite a bit, to say, what do these years mean? Because for a lot of people, these are the highest earning years. These are the years in which one's career develops the most. These are the years when people are earning the most. But Jody giving us some insight to say, yes, incomes have been, rising, and people are earning more in aggregate than they have before. But a lot of that has been eroded by the cost of inflation. A lot of living expenses are astronomically higher than they were for our parents' generation, and that is filtering into a lot of financial planning considerations for a lot of people that are there. Also, talking quite a bit about to say at what point should people be engaging with professional money managers, fund managers, financial planners, and the like. Obviously, she is saying you must engage with us, but we're just interrogating at the same time reasons why people find it hard to engage professionals, and what place what we're taught about money has when it comes to informing how people engage with money, and then how that filters into the type of advice that ends up being sought around that. Also got some insight into how someone like Jodi goes about engaging with customers, rather clients and ordinary people, just around their finances, and some insight as well into some of the pain points that the 30 to 50 generation is currently facing, and what type of conversations they are having with the likes of Jodi. And then at the end there, just getting a sense of, if we zoom out, what are some of the things that are either holding us back, what are the type of things that are gonna push us forward, and what type of things should young couples be talking about to make sure that they have a firm financial foundation. And the big thing that Jodi is advocating for is honest and transparent conversations. So that's been it for today. It has been a great one, just talking to Jodi Suchard, who is an advisory partner over at Citadel, giving us some insight into what's happening, how we can break away from some of the old ways of thinking, ending off on a, what she thinks is controversial, point around the fact that we must be having contribution from all sides of a family. But as far as I'm concerned, this should just be normal, and we should just be keeping it moving. So that's been it. Jodi, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much. I hope you'll have me again. I hope I haven't ruffled any feathers.
Ruffled feathers, definitely, but I don't think this will be the last time we engage with you.
I look forward to talking to you again. Thank you.
And that's been it for this edition of the Business Day Spotlight. Remember that you can find our latest podcasts on Business Live. That's under the podcast Business Day Spotlight tab. On Twitter, we're #BD Spotlight. And remember that you can review and subscribe for free on iono.fm, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, or wherever you choose to get your pods casted. Thank you to our amazing team. I've been Mudiwa Gavaza of the Business Day and Financial Mail, and this has been another edition of the Business Day Spotlight, which is a multimedia live production. So, from myself and the rest of the team, it is good evening, good afternoon, and good morning.